Hello, in front of us today is the P3003 from SealBoss. We're going to talk about the couple different features that this machine offers, and we're going to go through things as thoroughly as possible. So whether you already have purchased one or whether you're considering buying one, this segment will go ahead and flush out, we hope, most of the questions and any detail-oriented queries that you may have about the machine, what it's capable of doing. And I'm also going to point out what it's not capable of doing as well, so you have a full idea as to what the all-encompassing capabilities of the P3003 are. Okay, so the first thing about the 3003 that you're going to want to know is that it is primarily used and brought to market as an epoxy injection machine, okay? Specifically as a 2-to-1 ratio machine. So A side to B side in a ratio of 2 parts A to 1 part B. I do want to be very clear that if you have a need to shoot any material that is a 1-to-1 ratio, simply tell us and we can prepare this machine for you at a 1-to-1 ratio by making some changes to the cylinder as well as the hose for you on the B side of the machine. We would upgrade that to match that of the A side. So, kind of starting from scratch, when you take the machine out of the box, you'll see some parts and pieces, and we'll go through all of that so you have a comfort level as to what does what and where to put what. But as stated, 2-to-1 machine. So you'll see an A hose and a B hose, okay? And it's very important that we hook these up to the correct sides of the machine for obvious reasons. Inside of your hoppers, you'll also notice some convenient tools. Now, I've actually taken it out already. But when you open up, you'll find some very basic tools that are nonetheless very effective in setting things up, like the hoses. You'll have a couple of wrenches. You'll have a couple of Allen keys. And then you'll also have a ball and a spring. And I'll go ahead and I'll cover this now to get it out of the way and talk about why you have this extra ball and spring. Inside these cylinder bodies on both the A and the B side, you will find the ball and spring assembly. Sometimes if cleaning, we hope doesn't go by the wayside, but if sometimes it does, what can wind up happening is you may wind up with a little bit of accumulation of material, either A or B, on the ball itself and maybe even on the spring. If that happens, you may start to experience off ratio or maybe some pressure drops on either side, and that's due to the fact that this ball is not clean and isn't correctly seating back into the assembly the way it should to seal it off after each stroke of the piston, and we'll get into the pistons here in a second. Inside the hoppers as well, you'll find these filter bowls. These are critical in making sure that no foreign debris or any type of large objects wind up going down into the hoppers and then getting gravity fed into the mechanism itself. That wouldn't be good. That would actually cause a great bit of harm to the machine. And we just want to make sure that these are seated with the bulbous side down. You don't have to push them in too hard, but you just want to make sure they're down in there correctly. And then you would go ahead, fill with material, and then close up your hoppers on the A and B sides respectively. Okay, so given that we have an epoxy injection scope to cover and we're going to utilize this machine for a 2-to-1 ratio resin, you're going to want to make sure that you select the correct applicator. And we'll get into that a little more in detail here shortly. But for epoxy again, the applicator that you're going to want to request when you talk to your representative here at SealBoss is an epoxy applicator, okay? It's very different from that of the polyurethane applicator. And like I said, we'll talk about this here in a second. The epoxy applicator has check valves on both sides, and you'll also see a manifold with the A and the B. So as I was mentioning earlier, it's going to be very critical to make sure that your hoses on your A and your B side are not only connected to the proper side of the pump itself, but also to the applicator. Okay? Now the applicator has redundancy and control with these ball valves for emergency purposes as well as safety reasons. So that's a nice built-in added feature. On the end of our epoxy applicator for the P3003, you'll see a steel retaining nut. Okay? Now this is utilized to secure the static mixer to the manifold itself. So to do that, you'll unscrew the nut. You'll take your static mixer. And it's very key that you take the actual bell portion of the static mixer and seat it correctly onto the nub that's at the end of the threaded portion of the manifold. You want to make sure that that's as plumb as possible and seats fully flush, okay, to the end. Once you've met that condition, go ahead and take your retaining nut, put it over the static mixer, start threading it back down onto the manifold. And now you will be ready to start your hookup and start injecting. Now, one thing I want to point out about epoxy injection in general is that compared to, for instance, urethane injection, epoxy injection by general rule is a very low pressure operation. And just to put it into perspective, that low pressure quantity won't hardly ever exceed about 800 pounds per square inch in terms of pressure, and can be performed at a much lower pressure than 800. Okay, so when we're ready to inject epoxy, when we have our machine, and again, I want to make this as out-of-the-box friendly for you folks viewing and tuning in on SealBoss.com as possible. So when you get to the chuck where you actually seat the drill motor, you're going to find a little plastic bag in which you are going to find a key. Now this is key. What you're going to want to do is take that key and you're going to want to screw it onto the end of your drill. And that will allow the proper seating of the drill motor into this assembly. So I'll go ahead and I'll show you guys what that looks like here. That's this right here. You're going to want to make sure, just do a double check on this actual housing here, and make sure that it's going to be screwed on and threaded fully down as deep as it can go, because that's going to be very important as you start to operate the machine. What you'll then do is you'll align the sides of this key that I've now screwed onto the end of the drill motor into the slot, and you're going to want to ensure a flush fit, okay, with the green plastic of that drill motor down as far as it can go into that housing. Once you've met that condition, you know you're ready to go ahead and tighten up on your hex bolts and get started, okay? For purposes of this video, we won't go ahead and fully crank down because we're not going to actually inject epoxy, but you're going to want to make sure that that condition is met. Now, we'll go ahead and we'll go live on the hoses, and we'll go ahead and install those on the A and the B sides, because again, we want you guys to have all the potential questions satisfied in your mind. Okay, so you'll see these black covers on the actual receiving, the male end of the nipples there. And you'll hook your hoses up one at a time, okay? B side to the B and A side to the A. Just as a check when out in the field, if you have any doubt as to what hose goes to which side, if you take a look at the diameters of the hoses themselves, you'll notice that the A, okay, the A is here on the bottom. The A is larger in outside diameter than the B. Okay, so just as kind of a redundancy check mentally to make sure you're going through things just with some common sense. And again, you can just take your tools that come with it and you can tighten down on those fittings. And then you're going to want to take your applicator, okay? I usually like to get these ball valves that we have there as a redundancy feature out of the way. And again, keeping in tune with the A to A and the B to B, I'm going to go here on the B side, just because I'm closest to it. You can do it A and B or B and A or however you want. And I'm going to make sure that this corresponds to the B side of the applicator. Okay? So we'll get hooked up there. And again, I'm not going to crank down on this right now for purposes of the video. We just want to go ahead and illustrate the basic setup. And I'm going to get in my A hose here. I'm going to hook up to my A side. Okay? So we're A to A, B to B, and we are fully connected. Our drill motor is in place. And now I want to talk about another added feature here with a kill switch that we have that allows for the operator who's actually injecting the epoxy to be as close as possible to the port, because with epoxy injection, you're reinstating structural integrity to a feature or to a structural member of any type of a concrete structure, be it a beam, be it a wall, a slab, what have you. So it's very important that we monitor and pay close attention to the behavior of the epoxy as it travels down our static mixer into the port and ultimately into our substrate. So what we do is we have a kill switch here, okay, that's operated very simply by a button, okay? So depressing the button will either energize or de-energize the entire system, turning it on or off. We'll take our plug and we'll go ahead and hook this up to power source. And we have this white piece here that we'll take our plug on our drill motor and plug that into, okay? So once this is plugged into a power source and I have my drill motor set at a speed, and we'll talk about that here very shortly, I can operate the pump simply by pushing on this button, okay? Now, on the note of the speed of the drill, let's get this out of the way here and turn this here. Again, with epoxy injection, generally speaking, very low pressures. One nice feature about this particular drill, and some other drills have it, but we recommend the use of this drill to operate this machine, is a lockout mechanism with a speed control dial on it. Okay? Now, when I turn this speed control all the way till it can't go any further, I'm going to see this red trigger. I'm going to see more of the red trigger than if I were in the fast mode, okay? And that kind of makes sense, right? Because the further up I pull that trigger, the faster this drill motor is going to go, and the faster the pump is going to dispense the epoxy. And we don't want fast because that leads to higher pressures. Again, epoxy, slow and low. Keep that slogan in mind and you should do fine. So what we like to do on epoxy, again, fully depress our drill trigger, lock it out with the lockout button, turn it clockwise, and we'll see that actual red trigger physically start to lower, showing more of itself. When we can't go any further, we now know that this is the lowest speed setting that this drill will go in and operate in, okay? Another very key feature, and I do want to emphasize this, take note of this. This drill is to be operated in the forward position only. So the part that has the arrow pointing toward the forward of the drill, you want to have the switch toggled over to that side. Okay, I'm going to say it again. It's very important. You want to make sure that your switch on the drill is in the forward selection always. Never operate this machine in the reverse direction. Okay? Now, once we've hooked up and we've got power and we're ready to start going, we'll be off before we actually hook up. We will have gone ahead and pasted our ports, and you can find details of that operation on SealBoss.com. There's a very good video showing how you actually affix your tri-base ports to the wall with our SealBoss 4500 Quick Seal Paste. Okay, now if you're going to be injecting epoxy, structural epoxy through a mechanical packer, not to worry, we have the hardware to make that possible. So, much like the case of the surface application, everything will be the same from the retaining net up to the static mixer. In fact, you'll even have that 3/8 reducer on the end as well. But here's where things change a little bit. I'll put this down. What we're going to do is we're going to introduce a couple new parts and pieces. Okay? We have a Zerk coupler that'll actually couple to the Zerk fitting that's going to be on the mechanical packer. And we're going to go ahead and allow that to be joined to the tubing via what we call a 2031 connector. Very vital piece of equipment to make the mechanical packer injection of epoxy possible. Okay, so what we very simply do is take the male threaded portion of the 2031 and we screw it into the female end of our Zerk coupler. Okay, once that's done, we'll have our piece of tubing. And again, this is one of these quick disconnect fittings on the end of the 2031. We'll go ahead and hook that up. It's going to be very, very difficult to part that unless you pull down on that collar. Once again, just highlighting the feature of that very secure connection. So we have static mixer, 3/8 inch reducer. We just take our 1/4 inch outside diameter tubing and plug into that 3/8. At this point in time, we have a sealed system that can allow the travel of epoxy resin through to the Zerk coupler and ultimately into a mechanical packer. Okay? Very simple. Now, we do recommend the use of low pressure Zerk fittings for our mechanical packer injections of epoxy resin. And those low pressure Zerk fittings can be put into the end of the shaft of the mechanical packer. Okay? The difference is very simple. There's a ball and spring at the end of the Zerk that on typical mechanical packers, for example, if you're doing polyurethane injection, requires a certain amount of crack pressure to deseat that ball. Once that ball is deseated, you now have a pathway for the resin to travel through. With epoxy injection, getting back to the idea once again, it's generally a very low pressure operation. You don't want to have any pressure required to deseat any ball with any spring. That's just kind of fighting against our cause here. So what you're going to want to have is a low pressure Zerk. Those are available here at SealBoss.com, so if you're doing any type of mechanical packer injection of epoxy, be sure to request those as part of your hardware package. Okay? Now, when you're done, okay, at the end of any given shift, the cleaning of the machine, we'll focus on that here in a little bit. But I also want to emphasize, we've talked a lot about epoxy up to this point in time. One of the nice features about the 3003 is its versatility, its portability, and its overall utility. Getting into the versatility side of things, I want to point out something here on the B side that you guys are probably asking yourselves about. What's with the valves on the B side? And that's very simple. In the event you have a single component, for example, urethane job that you want to utilize the 3003 for, not to worry. What you can do is you can shut the outlet valve on the B side and open up the recirculation valve on the B side, okay? We recommend the use of a pump flush, for example, like the R70 by SealBoss Corp. You can open up the B, put pump flush in here, about halfway full. Take your single component urethane, for example, like a 1510 or a 1570 LV by SealBoss Corp. You'd catalyze your batch. You would put a catalyzed batch of single component resin for water stop, for example, in the A side. You'd close it, and then you would operate your drill motor as you would when you would do a urethane injection. So higher pressures, you would not focus on having that speed control dial as low as it can go. You'd have it just in normal operation. Once again, forward position only, so that switch is going to be in the forward position, and you would go ahead and you'd shoot that A side. Now, the applicator is going to change. So instead of the epoxy applicator, we're going to have this polyurethane applicator. Okay, now this polyurethane applicator, we'll talk a little bit about that and some things you can expect when operating it. Okay, so once again, just intuitively, A side hose, larger in diameter than that of the B side. So without having to take a look and try to backtrack to where it's hooked up, I know what I've got because I verified that in the beginning. It's only going to help me out. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to remove the nipple guards on the polyurethane applicator, and I'm going to fix my A side hose to my A side, and I'm going to do the same thing for the B side. So very easy swap out. And I do recommend, if you're going to be toggling between materials, to do a very thorough cleaning, and we'll get to that here in a second. Okay, so now we're hooked up and we're ready to go for a single component urethane application. And we got a little guard on the end of the Zerk coupler. So in reality, what we would be doing is, like I said, we're going to shut off the B side outlet, and then we're going to open up the recirc, and we're going to put like an R70 by SealBoss on the B side, half a hopper full. And we'll put whatever single component urethane, like a 1510 or even a Flex Gel by SealBoss Corp on the A side. And when we start to pump, what we're going to very simply have is A side material traveling down and through the A side hose, down the A side of the applicator, and exiting through the bend spout, through the Zerk coupler, into the packer, and ultimately into the wall to do a water stop injection, for example. Okay? The B side, you could even have redundancy to make sure you shouldn't have anything coming down the B side hose at all, but just to be safe, you can go ahead and close that valve off at the applicator as well, just to be double sure that you have nothing coming down the B side. So you've pretty much rendered the B side and relegated all of the operation of the B side to this recirc pathway. So you're just recirculating pump flush. Okay, you're actually just flushing out that B side really well with a lubricant and a conditioner. All right. So again, as you would normally do, you would have your packer set in the wall for a single component, for example, water stop, and you would just hook up that way. All right. Now, whether you do epoxy or you do urethane, one of the biggest things that I like to stress to folks who utilize our machines that will actually help you quite a bit in the field is the cleaning of them. Okay. Want to be very clear, and I want to debunk maybe a myth or two that's out there. Cleaning is done in a two-phase operation, okay? There are a lot of schools of thought on what to use. I'm going to make recommendations and give you folks what you should follow in terms of guidelines for cleaning that we know work and that we know will keep your machines up and running and ready to take care of any injection needs that you have. The first is this, purging, okay? Let's say in the case where you actually don't get to use up all your A and your B in an epoxy injection, for example, you've got a little bit in your tanks. What you want to do is you want to get a waste bucket and you want to run the machine so as to get rid of all A and all B so that your hoppers are dry. At that point in time, we recommend the use of xylene if you can get your hands on it. So the first aspect of cleaning is a solvent flush. Okay, there's acetone, there's toluene, there's MEK, there are a lot of things. For our machines at SealBoss, we have done internal testing and have found xylene to be the most gentle on the gaskets and seals. All right, so what you want to do is I recommend don't take any chances. Go at least 3/4 full or maybe even a full hopper on each side of xylene and run that cycle through. Again, into a waste pail. Dispose of that in accordance with your local jurisdictions and guidelines and laws. Once you've gone ahead and rid the system of xylene on the A and the B side by operating the machine normally, so the only thing you would really do, for example, in the case of an epoxy injection, you would want to get rid of your static mixer because that's a consumable anyway. So in essence, you would be running xylene through and you would have the applicator looking like this, all right? And you want to point this safely, always using gloves, safety glasses when operating the machine and cleaning the machine because chemicals are at play. And you'll go ahead and you'll dispense and you'll flush through with the xylene cycle. Rule of thumb is generally when you start seeing the xylene sputtering out of the end of these orifices on the end of the manifold in clear condition, the same way it looks when it goes into the hoppers, you've by default met the condition of cleaning out the mechanisms as well as the hoses. So you've rid the system of A, you've rid the system of B, now you're ready to condition. Getting back to that R70 pump flush we talked about a little earlier. You don't need a ton of it. I recommend about half a hopper on each side. What we're truly doing with the R70 after our xylene cycle is very simply getting rid of any residual xylene that's down inside the mechanisms or in the hoses so that we go ahead and lubricate and condition our machine as well as our hose lines. At that point in time, if we want to go ahead and close it up and winterize the machine, we can do so. If we want to get it ready for tomorrow's shift, we can do that as well. So hopefully that debunks any myths out there about how to clean, what to use. Those are the recommended procedures as well as materials. If you have any questions, you can always give us a call and talk to your knowledgeable technical representative here at SealBoss. We'd be more than happy to discuss that with you. So in summary, whether you're doing epoxy injection or whether you're doing polyurethane injection, the P3003, from its portability, its versatility, and its overall utility, is a great machine to have in your arsenal for injection. Thanks for listening in, and feel free to check us out online at www.sealboss.com. Thank you for your time.